Good morning, everyone. My name is Anjali Lee, and I'm one of the student program coordinators for the 2024 to 2025 school year.
Hi, I'm Kayla Moraga, and I'm the other student program coordinator. It is both our pleasure and our honor to welcome you to the 12th annual Student Leadership Exchange here at IMSA. Before we begin, we'd like to extend our sincere thanks to the evaluators and guests joining us today. We are incredibly grateful for your time and support, and this event would not be possible without your presence and engagement.
To all of our lead students, the dedication and creativity that you've poured into your projects has been truly inspiring. When your presentations conclude this afternoon, it will mark the completion of your lead journey as sophomores. From this point forward, how you choose to continue your project is completely up to you. Regardless of where your project goes next, each of you has demonstrated key qualities of leadership.
Through SLX, we hope you've discovered the importance of finding purpose in your actions and the value of pursuing what matters to you, no matter how challenging it may be. We are confident that each of you will continue to grow as leaders, and the skills you've developed in lead will support you in whatever paths you choose to follow in your futures.
We'd also like to thank Dr. Glazer and his office, Dr. Katie Berger and the Student Life office, our principal, Dr. Rowley, ITMC, and the rest of the IMSA faculty. This event especially could not have been possible without our wonderful lead team, so we'd like to thank our advisor, Mrs. Emma Wilson-Parker, our RC liaisons, Kiara Hardman, Tyson Brown, and Francis Marshall, the lead board, and finally, all the lead facilitators who have worked tirelessly in preparation for today's SLX.
And finally, but most importantly, we want to thank you, our lead students. You are the reason we are here today, and we cannot wait to see the incredible projects you've been pouring into over the past year. We're proud of you, and we're cheering you on. Okay, now without further ado, we'd like to welcome next year's co-coordinators, Avi, Sammy, and Kaden Tam, to introduce this year's Hollister lecture.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Caden.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Avi, and Katie and I are honored to serve as the lead program coordinators for the 2025-26 school year.
Firstly, like Anjali and Kayla mentioned, we are super excited to see the sophomores present their incredible work at the afternoon SLX presentations. Your dedication and effort was clear in the classrooms, and we are sure that you guys will do amazing today.
We'd also like to thank everyone, students, staff, and guests who helped make today possible. With that being said, we're excited to introduce the first event of SLX, the annual Hollister Lecture.
This annual lecture is sponsored by the family of one of IMSA's former faculty, Dr. Bernard C. Hollister. Dr. Hollister was named in 1985 as an Illinois master teacher. In 1986, he came to IMSA and worked in the social sciences department until his passing in 2000. He was the author of 4 books, more than 8 articles in educational magazines, newsletters, and journals. He even contributed chapters or selected sections to several high school and college textbooks.
Dr. Hollister was a frequent presenter and speaker at educational conferences and workshops, focusing on problem-based learning across the United States. He taught IMSA students that thoughtful and demanding research could solve real-world problems. Today, LEAD has brought a speaker who embodies the qualities advocated for by Dr. Hollister.
I would now like to present our speaker for the morning, IMSA alum Julia Stamberger, class of 1992. Julia is a visionary entrepreneur and a 25-year veteran of the food industry, renowned for launching and scaling sustainable, nutrient-dense foods and beverage brands. Her work focuses on addressing the challenges of a changing climate and a growing global population.
Julia's latest ventures center on leveraging globally cultivatable cover crops to create convenient, delicious, and climate-resilient products designed to help feed 10 billion people by 2050. We are thankful to have her here to share her insights and experience with us today. Without further ado, please welcome Julia Stamberger.
Thank you. Thank you all. And first, I'd like to say, when I was here in 89 to 92, we didn't have any of these clothes in our wardrobes. I don't know where you guys get the awesome suits and blazers, but well done. You look awesome. So it is an honor to be back here and to talk to you today. I want to get a show of hands really quick. Who here plans either immediately after school or at some point in the future or is today an entrepreneur? So put them up high. I can't see very well from here. So we have, what I say, about 20% of the people in this room consider themselves to want to be an entrepreneur. Is there anybody else who's on the fence, who's like, you know what, it's an interesting idea, maybe for me someday? Which is not a bad, there you go. Okay, maybe. There may be different things that are encouraging you. There may be different things that are holding you back. After seeing this, you may want to be an entrepreneur more or less. But what I am here to tell you today is the reality, real tactical tips that I have learned in a career that started actually kind of here in entrepreneurship. Back where there's Into right now used to be the newspaper offices and the yearbook offices for the school. I ran both of them as editor while I was here. That was my first taste of entrepreneurship in that it was a whole entity to be able to run. I thought initially what I liked was journalism. Not the case. I liked building things. So at the core, entrepreneurs are builders. They are people who want to build over and over again. Building is creating something new. And that something new could really be anything, but that is the core. What you see over here are some of the logos of some of the businesses that I've built over the last 20 years. You'll also find that entrepreneurs tend to fall into the category of serial entrepreneurs, which, unlike serial killers, doesn't mean there are a lot of bodies left behind, but it does mean that once you start, you find a lot of reasons to continue, and it becomes a little bit of an addiction, for better or worse. So let's talk about this today. I'm still working out my clicker. There we go. Okay, so we're going to define entrepreneurship one specific way today. There's a lot of ways to run a business. You could get a franchise. You could start a small mom and pop type organization. You could take over a business. What we're going to talk about today is starting and scaling a business that needs capital, and it needs basically your whole life to be thrown into it to be successful. This is extraordinarily tactical. So I have seen that some lectures, for instance, that you're exposed to are about lofty goals and leadership, how you merge those into your everyday identity. This is not that lecture. This lecture is actually real tips. It's why entrepreneurship is really hard, why failing is a huge part of success, and why an early win, getting lucky out of the gate and, making your first company IPO by the age of 24 is not necessarily a good thing. Entrepreneurs who fail and fail in repeated ways learn lessons that enable them to be more successful in the future. So keep one thing in mind. Entrepreneurship is not a short game. It is not a build something, flip it in 2 years, you're done. It's a long game. And in fact, most of the overnight success stories that you've been exposed to are actually, if you look into them, 10, 20 years in the making. There's one friend of mine that I played poker with for years who's a tech entrepreneur in Chicago. His first 20 years were failure after failure after failure. And then he did really well. And he sold his first company for a lot of money to a really big company. He was approaching 50 when he did that, and he's about to do it again. And by the way, he relies a lot on IMSA talent and will hire any IMSA kid out of school above others. So if you want his name, ask me later on. However, it's something I didn't know about him until we sat around the poker table and talked over time. How many failures were behind his success? But he became super successful as a result of some of those initial things. So keep that in mind. This applies to any business. I happen to have built a lot of businesses in food. This is not what I plan to do. I actually started off with my first real company after college. I started in e-commerce. It was an early Facebook and Yelp in the late 90s. And I started it in the Chicago.com economy. I went out, didn't know anybody, started networking. Within 3 months, I'd raised $3 million. This was back when J.B. Pritzker was a venture capitalist in Chicago. He was one of my first meetings. There was no 1871. There were none of those support organizations around. It was a brand new world. And then in 2000, March, the NASDAQ crashed. And all the funding dried up in Chicago because Chicago was slow to that market. And I lost my financing. I lost $3 million in financing to start my company. Everybody had to figure out something else to do. This happens. This is an example of one of the things we'll talk about today, which is things that are outside of your control. Because things that are outside of your control happen all the time. Sometimes it's not how good you are. It's how you deal with the obstacles that come up. And the one thing that we know is that there'll be things that are unexpected that happen. Do you think that any of the toy companies right now who are trying to figure out how they're going to make their holidays work this year because all of their products come from China thought last holiday season that that would be what's on their agenda? Something big, something they can't control, something that came out of nowhere, and something that could disrupt their businesses. And in March of 2000, that's what disrupted mine. Well, what did I do? I started a not-for-profit together with some of those other entrepreneurs to help people to learn networking skills to get back in the new economy so that we still had people in the Chicago area that wanted to go work for entrepreneurs. And then after that, I decided that maybe I'd get an MBA. And so I went to Kellogg and I got that MBA. When I came out of school in 2002, the economy still sucked. There were no jobs. And I ended up at United Airlines. And at United Airlines, I was given a mandate as an entrepreneur and a venture capitalist within a bankrupt company, because United was going down the tubes at the time, to create new things. I ended up creating their snack box program as a way to operationalize food service within the airline industry so that everybody could get meals all the time. That's where that came from. If you fly a United flight or really any other carrier, because I then took it to all the other carriers, that's where that comes from. I had no idea that I would ever work in food. But when I got into it, it was fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. It turns out you can do all these things in food that we don't do right now. And we don't do them simply because we don't do them, not because they're impossible. I sat down with a meatpacking company once and I said, look, I would really like to have your turkey pepperoni in a single serving. Can you do that? They said, sure. I said, can we get some of these chemicals out of there? I'm like, what about BHA and BHT? They're like, oh, we could use celery salt. I'm like, celery salt? Like in my kitchen, celery salt? They're like, sure. It's like, why don't you do that? They're like, yeah, we figured it out for the Canadians a few years ago. Nobody asked us to do it, so we didn't make the change. And that's through experiences like this, through talking to thousands of manufacturers, I figured out that anything is possible. You have to come up with a reason and push to make it so. So I stayed in food. Food is fascinating. I mean, for one thing, everybody's got to eat. You all do it 3 times a day and multiple other times. When I was here, food was currency. We would get up on Sunday mornings, take duffel bags to the cafeteria and pack them with donuts because that was the best food for the week, and then shuttle them back to our dorm rooms. If you do that, the idea didn't come from me. But it turns out that there is a ton of stuff going on in food globally that we can impact. So I started in tech, now I'm in food. I have friends who are in every single industry known to man, health and beauty, I don't know, you name it. I guarantee you I can hook you up with somebody who's in that field. All these fundamentals are the same. Anything I'm going to tell you today applies to any company you build. I don't care what your product is. It is all fundamentally the same. Okay, so what are the most important characteristics of an entrepreneur? I'd like to get at least 3 responses to this. Hold up your hands. Who's got an idea? One important characteristic of an entrepreneur over there in the middle. Passion. Okay, yes. Persistent, yes. Hustle, yes. All of those are really good answers because they center around the one thing that is the most important: tenacity. Tenacity is the most important thing. And that is hustle, and that is passion, and that is not giving up. So here's a list of things top of mind that are most important. Tenacity, communication skills. You cannot succeed as an entrepreneur without great communication skills. One of the reasons it's a great time to have this advice today is because you're in high school. You're going on to college, then you're going on to your first job. If there is an area here that you don't feel like you're great at, you have plenty of time to figure it out. Some of these things there are classes for. Others, there are different ways you can develop it through being in different organizations. But I guarantee you, communication skills are one of the most important things, if not the second most important after tenacity. And that feeds into sales skills. You are always selling. I'm selling to you guys right now. You go and pitch an employee and say, here's why you want to work with me, you're selling. You go and ask for money, you're selling. You get your product into an account, you're selling. But you also tell your parents why you're doing this and not the other thing they had in mind for you, you're selling. You are selling all the time, and people are learning to trust you. After that, tenacity. People skills, knowing how to work with people. Sometimes it's called team building. There are other things, but being able to relate to and work with people. Because the most important thing in terms of executing is your team, and you have to have one to make that work. Presentation skills feeds into communication and feeds into sales. One of the things that I still spend an insane amount of time on is putting together presentations and honing messaging so that investors will understand. I started a public company. I started a company and took it public a couple of years ago. Turns out the job of a public company CEO is pretty much always to be speaking to investors. And so over and over again, you're honing your message, you're getting it out in front of people. The bigger your company gets, the further you get away from actually the manufacturing of the products that you're making or whatever it is you're doing. Your job is about communication and presentation and tenacity. It keeps coming back to not giving up. Critical thinking skills are something that, here's the good news, you all have. You wouldn't be here if you didn't. Now, it sounds simple. However, I've found being out there in the world, hiring people and the rest, that where we are really failing as a society is in teaching people critical thinking skills. And it's only going to get worse with the rise of AI and everything else. Critical thinking is separating what's reality from what's not reality and being able to make decisions based on the information that you have. Really, really important. And you all have it, or you wouldn't have gotten in here to begin with. I was thrilled to hear networking mentioned. When I was your age, networking was not a thing. When I was in college, networking was not a thing. Connecting with people and building your network was not something we named. Now, it's the way the whole world has been run for millennia, but we didn't name it, and now we are. And because we're naming it, you can actively work on it. Who here has a LinkedIn page? Who here is going to have a LinkedIn page today by midnight? I want 100% of the room up. You need a LinkedIn page today. Why do you need a LinkedIn page? Anybody? Go on, man with a LinkedIn page. Yeah, Rich, go ahead. Both of you. Yep. Information, connections, knowing people. Have you ever heard the phrase, it's all about who you know? Right? It's true. That's how you get access. The companies that I build will now only hire by referral. We will only hire from people that we trust who recommend somebody to us because we know that is the best way to do it. I would not hire a recruiter for $1 million. Recruiters have produced some of the worst hires I've ever gotten in my life, and they've cost a lot of money. The best hires I've ever gotten have been referrals. You start building your network today, you could easily have 5,000 people in it by the time you graduate from college. And those people know people who know people who know people. You get business this way, you get opportunities, and you can access other people. Your network is the most valuable thing that you can grow, and there's no reason not to start today. Go ahead and invite me once you start your LinkedIn page. I'll connect you. I've got 20,000 people in my network. And these are all people that you can get in touch with. This is how you build your business. And I will tell you a quick story. A colleague of mine who has a similar background didn't do this. She's a little older than I am. She's a little bit further along with her career. She could have done this from day one. She didn't. It's her biggest regret. Because it's hard to get that far ahead on making those connections. So anytime you talk with anyone, you meet anyone, you're introduced to anyone, add them on LinkedIn. Doesn't hurt. And people love to network with students, right? It doesn't hurt, but it could certainly make all of the difference in the world to you at some point in time. So networking, really, really, really important. And so are great partners. Indefatigability, not necessarily the way you pronounce it, but you get the idea. It relates back to tenacity. In other words, nothing stops you because everything in the world is going to be trying to stop you. So being able to keep going and be unflagging, critically important. Unfazability, absolutely. But also luck. Luck's the one piece you can't control. Luck and timing. So you need all of the rest of these to manage that one. Now, when you go out and you look for people to join you, whether those be business partners or employees or whatever it might be, you want them to have all of these too. It's a great checklist because being an entrepreneur is really, 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 really hard. The only way to truly fail is to give up. If you keep going, you'll find a path. It may be a really, really long path. You may start a company. You may run out of money. You may try to raise money. You may try to restart the product. And then you may get an opportunity 6 months down the road because you kept looking to bring that product back to life. End doesn't necessarily mean end, but you need all of those tenacity and other things to be able to get there. So if you do become an entrepreneur, it will be hard. It will be really, really hard. I had a business partner once who joined me in starting a company because she thought it would give her more flexible hours. She might only need to work 20 hours a week and it'd be easier for her to pick up her laundry. She lasted a year. It's not how it is, but there are reasons that you want to do it. I've often felt like a lemming because it's really hard, but then you end and then you start again and you start again and you start again. You keep jumping off the cliff. But the reason you do that is because it's also super rewarding. Because here's the thing, you're in charge of your own destiny. How many people have heard horror stories of even alums getting laid off from their jobs unexpectedly within the first quarter of this year? There have been macro changes to funding. There have been macro issues that have hit the world. People didn't see that coming, but they were laid off. I haven't worked for anybody else since 2006. I don't plan to. I have had great years and I have had total shit years, but I've always been in control. People who are entrepreneurs are making a big bet and a big gamble, but you're making it on yourself. You're not putting your destiny in somebody else's hands. That could be terrifying because if you don't get up in the morning and turn on the lights for your company, it won't turn on. At a certain point, it'll run without you. Whereas if you work for a big organization, you can be a cog in the wheel. The company will be fine, if you're there or not. But at the same time, you don't have any control if something happens. So if you have a really, really cool product, you are 10% of the way there. A successful company is not about a really cool product. A really cool product is the price of entry to have a successful company because everything else is execution. I had an entrepreneurship professor way back who is a well-known guy in that universe, and he used to say, you don't worry about an NDA. There's no reason to, because for one thing, You should know that an NDA is only worth, or any IP is only worth the amount of money you have to go enforce it if somebody would violate it. It's not a very useful document. But at the same time, he said, you should be able to publish your business plan in the Wall Street Journal. Why would he say that? Because a business plan is just a business plan. The magic is in the execution. It is all about the execution. Does anybody think of a really, really crappy product that's making a ton of money? Who remembers the old ShamWow? Remember the ShamWow? Let me tell you about the ShamWow. Back in the days of broadcast TV, there were infomercials. And one guy decided that he was going to start something called the ShamWow. And the ShamWow was this amazing chamois. And what's a chamois? It's a piece of cloth that he used to clean his car, right? This was not a special item. This was a super generic item. There are lots of other places to get a disposable piece of ShamWow cloth, but he made millions off of this. It was all the execution. It's how he sold the ShamWow, not the ShamWow. And the ShamWow would have gone nowhere without this guy executing. There are tons of products like that. So whenever you get discouraged, think about all the ways that people are making money and building products, and those products are not as cool as yours. You're a step away, and that step is execution. So you need a really, really great team to execute, and the first person in that team is you. If you have $1 million to invest and you have a choice of two companies, which one would you pick? Company A has the world's best product technology, but kind of a C-level team. Company B has not so great technology. It's really not, but they have a rock star team. Where do you put your $1 million? The one with the rock star team and the crap product? You're absolutely right. Every investor, 1,000% of the time, and if, by the way, anybody ever answers you differently, they're a terrible investor, will take number 2, because they know that a rock star team can make a better product, but a crappy team will lose the opportunity to execute on a great product. That is more important than anything else when it comes to that. So one of the things that you know is that the unexpected is always going to happen. Companies, mine included, spent hours and hours putting together detailed financial models. When you see a detailed financial model, that's a P&L statement, an income statement, a cash flow statement, a balance sheet. By the way, if these terms are unfamiliar to you, don't worry about it. Take an accounting class in college. You need to, for even your own life, understand how to read these. And one reason people say you should be able to read them is so at least you know your accountant isn't ripping you off. You don't have to be the accountant, but you do have to know if he's stealing from you. So with those financial models, you use them to tell a story in words about your company and how you plan to build it. That's what a financial model is. That's what the plan is. And as soon as we finish one, we know one thing. What we put in there is not what's going to happen. It's not going to be exactly like that. There's no way. We don't have a crystal ball. We didn't hit it on the head, but we know that we have a story and a path, and we've figured out how to make this scenario happen. So if something changes, we can change along with it. That is the important piece. The things that people don't expect are the events that come out of nowhere. And over the last 20 years, I can tell you about economic downturns. I can tell you about things like COVID. I have an airline brokerage that I started back in 2009. It puts half of the snacks that you see on airlines today on airlines. When COVID hit, the business stopped cold for the next 18 months. No airlines placed a single order. There was literally no money coming into that company. These things happen. You have to figure out around it. And by the way, we did. We figured it out. We weathered it. And now that company is doing better than it ever has. But these things will happen. That's why you need the A-level team, is because everybody knows this shit happens. It's how you react to it that's important. So the unexpected is the expected. This is why you need those skills. Okay. We've talked about selling, and we've talked about the fact that you're always doing it. Don't think about selling as a bad thing. When you're networking, you're selling yourself. You're explaining to people why they want to know you or what value you have to bring to the table. So just think of yourselves as always being in sales as your number one job. Doesn't have to be conscious, but that's how you're going about things. And you're selling every time you send an email, because how people read the email shapes their perception of who you are, right? How you communicate, what you say, et cetera. It's really important. Two key areas that are totally underestimated when you're starting a business. These are ones that no one understands. And I will tell you, I've talked to MBA teams. I've talked to people who are out there who have their own businesses right now. People underestimate this all the time. Number one, customer strategy, how you're going to get customers. Number two, financing strategy, how you're going to get money. One thing, just let me caution you never to say, if you have a company and you have a $10 billion market, never ever tell an investor you're going to get 1% of that $10 billion market. So it's going to be really easy to get customers and you'll at least get that. Because that's not how you get customers. It's incredibly tactical, it's incredibly expensive, and it makes or breaks your business. But the other thing that I've seen break more businesses than ever is the financing strategy. I'd like to have some folks name some ways that you can get a company financed. If you need money, what's a way to do that? Show of hands. Loan, yes. Yep. Sorry, could you a little louder? So cut spending is one way, but it's not a way to finance. So that's how you get your cash through a tight time, is you can reorganize it, but how do you pull money in? Investors, yep. What types of investors? Anybody got anything else? Yep, in the white. Yep. Okay, angel investors, government grants? Private investors, anything else? Okay, I'm actually glad to hear no one say venture capital. Because often that's kind of the only answer that people know. But it's much more nuanced than that. So one thing to be careful of when you start your financing strategy, it can, even at a very, very early stage, the first money you get in the door, if you do it the wrong way, it can disrupt the entire rest of the business. What does that mean? You could work your butt off for 5 years, have a good exit, and the end of the day, not get any money. Be really, really careful to how you do your financing strategy. So here's a whole list of ways that you can get money, and I've done most of these. So banks, lines of credits, and ABLs. These are very good once you are making money. So one approach is to get yourself financially stable as a company. You're making money, you're profitable, and then a bank will loan you money. An advantage to this is it doesn't cost you any equity, right? You don't have to give up any % of your company to get it, but you do already have to have money to come in. Community development and government loans are talked about all the time. These are not typically available to you without you making a big compromise. Does anybody know what the big compromise you have to make with an SBA loan is? It's a personal guarantee. Do you know what a personal guarantee is? That means if something goes wrong, you personally and all your personal assets are on the hook to pay it back. That completely gets rid of the point of forming a corporation. Never, ever, ever sign a personal guarantee, particularly for a company where you have outside investors. It means you're taking all the risk personally and only getting a fraction of the reward. Credit cards are a good early way to do it. Very expensive. Friends and family, yes. Angels, yes. All very viable. Venture capitalists. With venture capitalists, it is very, very difficult to take money from them and maintain control of your company. So when you think about how you finance it, starting small and scaling up, the more you can go and the longer you can go without taking equity-based financing, the more control you have over your company. And then everything else, private equity, which is much bigger raises and also often require majority control. IPO, that's a public offering, so you go public on the stock market and anybody can buy in. Very complicated. You are also subject to the capital markets. Crowdfunding is now really an opportunity that wasn't years ago. And then you can do debt, equity, convertible debt, promissory notes, accounts receivable-based financing. All of these are options. So when you think about getting money for your company, think through the financing strategy. It's not as easy as we're going to go pitch a VC and then they'll give us some money and then we'll go. There are a lot of options and opportunities. And again, you could make or break your exit from that company based on how you do it. Okay, let's talk about failure. The best entrepreneurs have failed. I say this through my personal experience. The entrepreneurs that I see that are really good, that make money for themselves, that make money for their investors, are ones who have done it again and again and again, and they've learned from those successes. The worst entrepreneurs, and I can just tell you this from personal experience, are the ones who got lucky. Right time, right place, little work on their part, they made a bunch of money. They think it was because of them. And the reality is, you only have so much control when it comes to an exit. So yes, you contributed to it, but a lot of it's market conditions and you got lucky. One of the reasons that investors like to invest in entrepreneurs who have had a failure is because they've learned a ton. And you know what? They learned it on somebody else's dime. So rather than making those mistakes on their investment, they already made them and they learned from them. So failure isn't necessarily a bad thing because it teaches you a lot and you take those lessons onto your next company. It's not optimal, but that's where tenacity comes in. Keep going, don't stop, and figure out how to use those lessons for the next things. All right, so why would anybody want to be an entrepreneur after hearing all this? It's hard. You can fail. You can need to put your life on the line. You've got friends, family, other people who are invested in you, who are along for the ride. There's also the reward. You're in control. You're building something. I have literally fed millions of people. Sometimes you see yourself sitting there when there's a big room of people who are working on the problems for your company. You can step back and think, wow, none of these people would be here unless I decided to do this thing. And I kept going step by step by step. Look at what I have done in the world. You know, when you're sitting there inside a large company as another cog of the machine, that would likely mostly be there without you. So do you want to build and create something new? Do you want to make change? Do you want to make things happen? And at the end of the day, being able to look back and go, look, I did those things. Or do you want to live your life, make some money, go up a ladder, take the more secure route? There's nothing wrong with either one. But think about who you are. And right now, sitting here in high school is not too early to be thinking about that. Most entrepreneurs are hardwired. You'll know at your core which way you feel pulled. You're either terrified of this or you're drawn to it. Or somewhere in your life and career, you may start off not being in this universe, but may find out that that's something that's appealing and that works for you and your family. So what can you do to be successful as an entrepreneur? It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It is every day of your life. All these silly things that you hear about your health, like getting enough sleep, eating right, exercising, it's really important, man. Most entrepreneurs never stop. You can be in your 80s and doing this. You have got to take care of yourself in order to be successful. It also helps if you're hedged. Start side hustles to your hustles. You know, there have been times when other companies that I started and kept going, which weren't my main focus at the time, kept my family fed while I was working on something else. There's all sorts of things to know, like tax planning strategies. For instance, if you're in the food industry, you can write off most of your food. Get good advisors who can help you with this. It actually is an interesting way to live. Building your network, we've talked about. Here's something. I guarantee you, find me somebody who disagrees with this, who has run a company, and we'll have a conversation, but everyone agrees. You fire people too slowly and hire too quickly. I have never seen anybody say, wow, I should not have fired that person. That was a really bad move. I can't tell you the number of times that I personally have said I should have fired that person 6 months ago. What a mistake to let them stay on. Your gut will tell you. Okay. Talked about never signing a personal guarantee. And I would also like to advise everyone in this room to play poker. Does anybody know why I'm advising you to play poker? Come on. Yes. Yes. It's networking and social interaction. Entrepreneurship is also very lonely. And if you are able to find a hobby and some time that you can spend socially with even other entrepreneurs, where you can unwind and talk about things, a poker table is a great way. I never liked golf. It doesn't seem like a great way to have a conversation. It's outside, it's noisy, it takes a lot of equipment, but poker is pretty cool. Women are also particularly good at poker and they're underrepresented. So learn how to play poker and find other entrepreneurs you can play with. This has been a lot about fear of being an entrepreneur, the challenges of being an entrepreneur, and the straight talk about being an entrepreneur. But I'm here to tell you that every single person in this room has what it takes. I know this about you because I know what it takes to be here. It's not just the fact that you're smart. It's also the fact that you took a step to be independent at age 15 or younger and come to this school and thrive. You have all the base skills. I have companies right now that are hiring IMSA alumni. They automatically get a pass for the door. I think we'll hire another 4 next week because we know the critical thinking skills are there. Everything we look for in an employee is there. The tenacity is there. The ability to stay up all night studying, the ability to get into great colleges, everything that you do right now, you could easily be an entrepreneur. The choice is yours. But if you think it's interesting, start honing the skills. Start your network. Reach out on LinkedIn. Sign up for an accounting class. Start thinking about the types of things you'd like to do. Start thinking about the types of people you'd like to do them with, because it could be a really, really fun career for you. And any industry you can think of is one where you can be an entrepreneur. So the final thing that I will say is that the only thing you can ever do wrong as an entrepreneur, fundamentally wrong, is stop. There is always a solution. It may not be the one that you want. It may not be what you idealized for yourself. It may not be the way that you think things would work. But one truism I have found is you never know what the path is going to be. That's why a financial plan is not a crystal ball. That's why I started in tech and ended up in food. I had no idea that joining an airline was going to change my life that way. Anybody know where I met my husband? He was the head global grocery buyer at Whole Foods. That's how we met. I went in to pitch him a product. We got married a year later. Can change and impact your entire life. You cannot control the journey, but you can stay in front of the journey. You can adapt to it. You can take it in. You can pivot, and you can keep going. Don't stop. And that is all my advice for you today. The one thing I will add is if you have any questions, do I have any time for questions right here and now? Can anybody who's directing tell me if I have additional time for questions? Have time for questions? Okay. First of all, let me just add that I am available and easily findable. I'm on LinkedIn. I am in 1,000 other places, and I've done a lot with IMSA. IMSA changed my life in a very fundamental way. I needed to get out of the situation I was in and come to IMSA and find my way myself independently as a young kid. And it's probably not an unfamiliar story to a lot of you. but it gave me that opportunity to do so, and it changed my whole life. For that, I am happy to give back. And if you ever have any questions related to this particular topic, on which I know a lot, there's a lot of topics I don't know anything about. This one I do. Feel free to reach out. Now, that said, who has questions right here, right now? Anything is on the table. Anything is on the table. Yes. My favorite poker, what? My favorite poker hand is anything I can get on a charity tournament table. Do you know why a charity tournament table? Why would you want to play a charity tournament? Sorry, I can't hear. Couldn't hear, but let me tell you why. It's amateur hour. People show up for charity poker tournaments. They're like, I can play poker. They've never played before. They played once. They're with their buddies. And they underestimate women so badly. I mean, guys, it's 95% men at the tables at these events. You go sit down as a woman, you can have any hand and win because you will be underestimated. And that's a quality you can use in the right situation. When you play with your friends, no, you're out of luck. They know how you play, and it's a totally different game. But that's why charity tournaments are fun. Any other questions? Yes. So the biggest one is by stopping. We've covered that, right? And deciding that it's too much, you're not going to go on because you can't always find a path. But the holes that I've seen that are the biggest are financing strategy. When you get money, let's say an investor gives you $3 million to start a company. You now have a runway. If you do not take off and get to your ability to live on your own, right? Think of that as fuel that gets you through liftoff to a certain point in your business. At that point in time, another financing strategy needs to take over. If you run out of money before you get to that next step, then businesses fail, and they fail all the time for that reason. A lot of it in food is because they underestimated the customer acquisition costs, but it has very little to do, again, with the quality of the product. In food, the general rule is that products need to taste delicious, but you can buy your way onto the shelves, and you can buy your way off of the shelves if you have enough money. If you run out of money, then your options get real slim real fast. Another thing to think about when you're looking at a financial strategy is your strategy something to be profitable or to exit at a multiple of revenue? And here's what I mean by that. In the food industry in particular, over the last 20 years, the big guys, the Kellogg's and the Krafts and the rest, have figured out they are not good at innovation. And because they're not good at innovation, they're not good at matching customer needs quickly when they change. So the whole reason that things like high fructose corn syrup got taken out of food wasn't because the big guys were like, we're going to take it out of food. Just like that meat producer. Nobody said, hey, take out BHA, BHT. No one had a need for that. What happened was small companies started making products without high fructose corn syrup, getting them onto shelves, and then customers started buying those products. And the big guys are like, whoa, 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 I guess we need to change because we're losing market share. Well, it is a lot easier for a very large company to buy a small innovative company and stick it inside of their behemoth and take out all the costs. So what companies were doing is they were starting these products that were more aligned with the market needs. And they were scaling those in grocery, and people were buying them, but grocery is really expensive. The slotting costs alone that are involved, the promotional costs, the distributor chargebacks, you could be underwater and not making money for years while gaining distribution and throughput. That's a gamble. It's a real big gamble, because if you run out of money before you exit to a partner, you could have nothing. The reason that people bought companies that were not profitable in these situations were they had proved that they had a certain amount of distribution and success with customers. And the big guys thought, okay, I can take that, put it into my infrastructure, get the costs out of it, and then have a really successful product. That's what they thought. And that's why things like RX Bar, when RX Bar sold, it was doing about $80 million in revenue. And the financial buyers who came in, like private equity, they're like 100 million, we'll pay you 100 million for it. And then Kellogg's ultimately won it, but Kellogg's and the two other bidders bid 400 million, 500 million, 600 million. Kellogg's wanted it for 600 million. A financial buyer wanted it for 100 million. The reason was, to Kellogg's, it was worth that to put it in. So the question you asked is, where is our businesses failing? Over the last 3 years, 50% of the startup activity has left the food market because the companies that were building like that, when the interest rates went up, investors stopped investing. And so they ran out of money because their path and trajectory was, let's get into retail, let's get into retail, let's get into retail. That's the valuation. If you don't have the money to support that, you run out of money. So when you are thinking through your financial strategy, another way is be profitable. If you're profitable, you control your destiny. Profitable means you're making more money than you're putting out. You're not living on venture capital. You're not living on speculative capital. You're not over diluting what's going on. And that has been highly unfashionable in tech and in the food industry for a lot of various reasons for a very, very long time. But profitability is back. Control of your destiny is back. Making money, the old-fashioned way, is back. Whether or not it's in or out of fashion, the shorter the window to profitability and the longer you can stay profitable without outside capital, the more you control your destiny. And the second that you are building something where you are relying on outside capital, you have a limited window and that clock is ticking. Next question. Yes. How do you build a stellar team? It's a fantastic question. First of all, always be looking out for stellar individuals. Think about the criteria in terms of what we discussed and what's really important. Those are fundamentals, and then you need skill sets, right? You may be doing something that needs great engineering minds. You may be doing whatever it is that's specialized, you're going to need those people too. But this is where your network comes in. I have hired people every way known to man. I've hired them through LinkedIn. We've hired them through having an HR manager on site. We've hired them through, you name it. You name a way of finding a person, odds are we did it. Again, the worst hires I ever had were through executive recruiters. Don't use executive recruiters. They don't know the people that they're recommending to you. Their job is to meet people, cultivate their resumes, see if the resume is a match for yours, and then they charge you between 30 to 100% of that person's salary and bonus. It is not impossible. You could pay somebody $200,000 to make a shitty hire, and that hire could tank your company. So the best way to hire a team is through your network. Find people who know that individual. If it's a duck, it's a duck, it's a duck. If somebody won't get a recommendation from a friend because they wouldn't recommend them, they like them, but they wouldn't recommend it for your company, that's a tell. If they say, yes, this is the best possible person, they're worth an interview. So with there's a company that I took over last summer called Alpha Zeta, which is an Amazon management company. And I took it over because it was started by my sister, who went to Stanford, got her doctorate in environmental biology, and decided she wanted out of academia. This may be very realistically something that happens in y'all's careers. Academia is a very specific place. She said, where can I apply my skills? I said, you know what? The world needs really good Amazon management. I had taught so many people how to run Amazon. At the time, Amazon and food was very small. It was getting bigger, and it's incredibly complex. The back-end technology of Amazon is complete shit. It is so hard to navigate and get stuff done, and everything's always changing. So I said, look, start a company that has a data-driven approach to Amazon. And so she called friends of hers from back at Stanford grad school who, got their master's in computer science and had gone on to a Silicon Valley startup and exit. She called folks who were actually IMSA friends of mine. There are two people who are part of this company. One of them graduated from IMSA, went into the military and got a career in military intelligence. She is the best Amazon project manager we have. She's amazing with data. She's amazing with client leads. She's amazing with everything. We're now hiring 4 more IMSA people into that company. And the reason is that and I just posted the job on the IMSA Alum Network. That's where they came from. And some of them are people that I knew in school who are looking to add this to their lives. So there are different ways to build it, but you're actually building those networks right now. And so we were able to, just as an example, so we're scaling, so we're building a team, we're adding more people to the team. They need to be people who fit a specific profile, and IMSA alums are a perfect overlap with this profile. By the way, the jobs are flexible. You can work from home. Some people are doing them part-time, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all of these benefits, right? We make it very friendly to the talent that we want to attract. And we were able within minutes, not months, for 0 cost, find amazing talent who fit right in with the team. You are building the basis for an excellent team today. You're already doing it. So that's why keeping up with your network is so important. You don't know where y'all are going to end up. You don't. Could be anywhere. And you could be interesting or important to each other in ways that you have no idea of today. Just stay in touch. That's all networking is stay in touch and then be able to reach out and add more people to that collective. And I'm sorry, you've had a question for a while. Did you have a question? Yep. So it's a fusion of food and technology and what that looks like right now and what it may look like in the future. First of all, the answer is yes, 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 and yes. Already there and more is coming, but maybe not in the way that you would think traditionally. So I also have a company called 1+1 is 3 that was started by myself and our chief operating officer from Planting Hope, who she has a 30-year career in food, has built and managed plants and things, and she's recently dove right into AI. And the reason is because AI supports business practice execution. And figuring out how to involve it in that can be really, really interesting. Here's a minor example. When you are planning to get food from one place to another, you're dealing with trucking routes, you're dealing with, does it need to be shelf stable, refrigerated, et cetera, et cetera. AI can optimize that route planning very, very quickly, much faster than human brains can. When it comes to developing different variables in food, when you're formulating it, again, you can use AI to help to influence and fast forward some of that development that, again, often takes time and development in the lab and testing and the rest. You can do a lot of that basic work. It's a tool that properly applied can do all sorts of things. Now, food tech has been in the food industry forever, and it's taking a lot of different forms today. I'm on the board of directors of the Plant-Based Food Association. It has about 300 members, people you've heard of like Oatly and Danone and Impossible, and tiny little companies that you've never heard of. And we made the decision not to allow cell-based meat into the Plant-Based Food Association because there's now technologies that are replicating meat in labs. They don't involve hurting or slaughtering animals, but at the same time, they're not technically plant-based. So there's a lot of blurring of the lines and quite a bit of money has been invested in that. However, that whole sector has slowed down dramatically with the capital markets. When interest rates went up in 2022, it caused all sorts of problems. And one of the biggest problems was the investment capital stopped. It just stopped. Trillions of dollars on the sidelines. People were risk averse. They didn't know where this was going. Markets hate unpredictability. They really, really hate it. They would rather have predictable stagnancy than unpredictability ahead. And so trillions of dollars that would usually be deployed were sidelined. And where it was typically sidelined was in speculative food research that was privately funded, like you're talking about. So it's like the Just Eggs of the world and things. All of that got stopped. But food technology is really, really important to where we're going. So one piece of food tech that we worked on for a long time was based on the simple sesame seed. So sesame is something that has been around for thousands of years, right? You find it in Egyptian tombs. It's something which we have used as a foodstuff. But what's really interesting about it is how functional it is. So sesame will grow in a desert. Very, very little water required. It actually grows like a weed. So there's no pesticides or herbicides required. It's naturally pest resistant. So animals who try to eat it, it's bitter. They walk away. And those tiny little seeds are a lot of oil, but also a lot of protein and minerals. So what we figured out how to do was how to extract that protein, but also make it not taste bitter. Because what had happened forever is it's easy to grow. It's also a great cover crop. It replenishes nutrients in the soil. Farmers would harvest it just functionally to make the soil better, and then they'd end up basically throwing it away or pressing it for oil. Turns out, after you press it for oil, that pulp that's left is pure nutrition, but it tastes really bitter. So you can't even use it for animal feed. We use food tech to create bitter blockers that would float that note over your tongue so that we could use it as a foodstuff and as the basis for a plant-based milk, which is as nutritious as dairy, but uses 10% of the water. So that is food tech applied to a well-known product, an easy one that we all know that can grow around the world. And that's why with 10B, we talk about how we end up feeding 10 billion people in 2050. It's how do we take the crops that we know we're going to have, because it's not going to be avocados, say goodbye to quinoa, almonds, they're going because we don't have the resources to support them globally. And products like rice, which are like, oh, everybody eats rice. Rice is easy. Rice is responsible for 10% of the methane emissions in the atmosphere right now. Do you know that? It's because the way that rice is grown is through flooding the fields. There's a bacteria that's created, and the bacteria releases methane. 30% of the methane in the atmosphere of Asia is due to rice farming. And rice doesn't have a lot of protein, so it uses a ton of resources, doesn't have a lot of protein, and it metabolizes so quickly that it doesn't provide a lot of nutrition. In sedentary people, it turns to fat. So we invented a rice that's 10% rice, but 90% lentils, peas, and chickpeas, because those can be farmed all over the world. They're incredibly nutrient dense, and they supply 4 to 6 times the levels of protein and fiber that eat the same way. So AI can accelerate figuring out these permutations, but the food tech part that we think is most sustainable and viable isn't the cellular meat. It's figuring out what crops we can really use to feed people and then creating easy swaps for those items in everyday nutrition so that we can say, look, you're not sacrificing taste. It's super easy. It'll fit your budget. We're just going to swap these things out. You're getting more nutrition, and we can sustain that. Yeah. I think I've had time for maybe one more question. Yep. What's the process of raising capital from the ground up? Okay, first, figure out how much capital you need and when you need it. Then figure out if you can haircut that and look really, really hard at the strategy. You don't want to overcapitalize. You don't want to undercapitalize. Then once you've decided what that mechanism is going to be, you start the process of going out and finding that money. So let's say you decided you needed to raise $1 million through angel investors to be able to create an MVP for a tech project. The first thing you would do is put together a full and complete business plan. That includes how you're going to use the money, what you expect to get out of the money, what an investor would get for giving you the money. There are some ways that it's easier to kick that conversation down the road. For instance, you could say, okay, investor, I would like to raise $1 million, but I'm doing it through a convertible note. That means that this is effectively a loan as opposed to equity, but it will collect interest and then convert to equity at the valuation of the first priced round. So what that would mean in practical experience is you would take in the $1 million. Let's say that you had a year runaway on that. And at the end of the year, you expected to raise equity capital. You'd be able to create a valuation at that time that was based on more than just an idea because you would have created something. If you try to raise capital without anything there, your valuation could really suck, and it's difficult to price. So there are mechanisms that, depending on what you're doing, can help you to kick that can. Then you have to find the right investors who are interested. You will get told no at least 90% of the time. It is not easy to raise capital. That's what the tenacity is all about. That's what being indefatigable is all about. That's what the rest of it is. It's like acting. You can go out for 10 roles, get turned down for all 10, get the 11th. You'll hear thousands of stories like this. Jeff Bezos almost stopped, or sorry, it wasn't Bezos. Howard Schultz almost stopped after, 200 venture capital calls trying to raise money for Starbucks, et cetera, et cetera. There are tons of war stories. They are pretty real. Raising capital is hard. Now, when you find an initial investor, if you're raising at the angel level, they will often then take it to people that they know and say, hey, I'm coming into this deal. Do you want to come in too? Money loves to be de-risked, and it can be de-risked by having more people in the deal. Nobody wants to be the only one. Once you get a couple, it's easier to get more because it's been de-risked. Also, because it's not just a combination of other people's money, but other people have done diligence and said, okay, due diligence is the term that people use for the process investors go through to say, hey, should I invest in this deal or not? It's them looking at all of your materials. It's them asking questions. It's them meeting with you. That's the due diligence process. Once one investor has done that and said yes, especially if that person is in the network of your other investor, that other investor is more likely to say yes as well. This is, again, where your network comes in. You'll see angel sites and venture sites and things out there that say, hey, if you're interested in submitting to us, email this over. Those deals never get funded. They never even get looked at. You send a deal over the transom, nobody gets funded. Really, the only way to get in front of investors is through referrals, even venture capitalists. To do that, you need a network. Do you see how a lot of these themes keep pointing themselves back, right? There's only a few fundamentals here. Your network is super important. Tenacity is super important. Thinking through your strategy is super important. And back to the financing, then you design the strategy around what you want to achieve. Let's say that you want to make widgets and your widgets have a 50% profit margin. And the money that you need is to buy the initial widgets so you can go sell those widgets and make money. You may only need a $100,000 loan from someone. And then you have a path to pay back that loan. And then the good news is, after you're profitable, and this is the irony, everybody wants to give you money. It is very easy to get money if you don't need money. Banks like to loan to you if you already have money, right? Nobody likes risk. So the more that you can de-risk things, the more money you can get in. That can grow your business faster and you keep control. So that's why, to get back to your question, how do you raise money? You start with, what do I need to raise? What am I doing with it? How do I want to grow this business? What kind of a business is it? My first business required $3 million to build the website before there was a product to sell. My next business just needed to buy the widgets to fulfill a contract that we'd already gone out and gotten. Very, very, very different approaches, very, very different uses of funds. There is no one size fits all financing strategy. And so that's why when an MBA student says, I'm going to go get some venture capital for my business, I said, wait a second. That is one answer. But design your strategy. Look at the 20 different ways you can get financing. Figure out what you need it for, because you can very easily jump into something that doesn't match your overall goals for your business. And that bell is really, really, really hard to unring. I had a company that I started in 2006. I took in one round of capital at the time when we had one growth plan that was charted for us and what we thought we would do. The markets changed dramatically in the industry that we were in. We pivoted that business. We spun off a subsidiary. We grew that subsidiary. We kept the core small business. Guess what? 15 years later, I still had those original investors in a small business that had nothing to do with the original business. And so in fourth quarter, I bought them out. It took me between 2007 to 2024 to buy out those investors. So just be very, very careful that your financing strategy matches your business strategy, because it can be a really, really, really hard bell to unring once those documents are signed. Thank you, everyone.
All right, can we have one more big round of applause, please? Okay. So if you have any questions for our Hollister lecture speaker, I'm sure you could pop up there, introduce yourself. This is a great opportunity to network. For my sophomore students, you are getting released. You have about a half an hour, I think.